but I will focus on Qualtrics-related trust issues that I myself have developed over the years based on my experience detecting data fabrication in master thesis at Erasmus University. So I started there in 2018. Every year, I coach 10 people and I co-supervise another 10. Most of them use Qualtrics to collect data. And almost every year, I find at least one student who answered their own survey as if it's the early 2000s. So out of 20, and I don't think it's me, I hope it's not me, and I warned them in advance, do not do that, I'm gonna check it. And it still happens. So based on my experience, I'm gonna focus on 3 ways to fabricate data when using Qualtrics. By all means, there's more. That's just 3 examples because I only have 22 minutes. That's why I timed it, and not a full month. All of those 3 examples are also very much in line with what the Netherlands Code of Conduct for Research Integrity clearly indicates as the clearest examples of research misconduct. So let's just go through them one by one. One could claim to use Qualtrics to collect data, but actually don't use anything. Just put data in an Excel file while drinking a glass of wine one evening. What can you do to figure this one out? Well, you should ask to be added as a collaborator. Because then, well, if there's nothing to be added to, kind of, I don't know, an indication. All right, so you might be thinking, if I have collaborator access and then I download the data myself, then that's it. That's real raw data, right? No, that's not. Why not? Well, there are more ways to fake data. So you could have a Qualtrics survey and then you could just fill it in yourself. How can you detect this? Again, for many of these things, you need to be added as a collaborator. And more specifically, I'm just going to do a live demo of how this works. And I'm going to use one of the files that I used to detect data a few years ago, and it was also confirmed by the student that they actually did it. So all the students that I coach or co-supervise are required to add me as a collaborator on Qualtrics, and then I download the data myself. Do not convert. I'm not a fan of Excel, but I just want to show you that this is a 2-minute check. So I download the data, I open it in Excel, I find the IP address column, and then I go conditional formatting, highlight, duplicate. Okay, just the default, doesn't matter. And then with the selected column, I see that it's 231 rows. It doesn't matter, there's some duplicate like headings and stuff. That really doesn't matter. So 231, select everything, go to data, filter, and then filter by color. And then select this column again. 130. 130 out of 231. When an Excel file lights up like a Christmas tree, that's not a good sign. So normally, it should be at most 10-20%. There are valid reasons for why you might see duplicate IPs in there. I'm not saying that whenever you see duplicate IPs, that's evidence of fraud. No, but it is something you can dig in deeper. And there are simple ways of doing this. So, for example, the next thing that I would do is back to the data. Well, without a mouse, takes just a tiny bit longer. Clear this. I would check how many of these were partial responses, because that's one valid situation in which, like, someone starts a survey, something happens, they stop, they start again, it's going to appear as duplicate. Well, there's just a couple, really, just a couple. So then I can do something else and just insert the pivot table. Again, very easy, no fancy anything. IP address, I'm gonna count response ID. Sort largest to smallest, and oh, look at this, 29. If you double click, it's going to open it in a separate worksheet. And then I'm going to sort this, oldest to newest. And I'm sorry for the people really at the back. You'll have to trust me, or I can also share this. If you look at the timestamps, the end date of the previous end date for the previous response and the start date for the next one are usually separated by just a few seconds, 1 minute at most. So the same IP address, it's very likely the same device. With just a few seconds, you don't even have time to give it to the next person and say, hey, would you please answer the survey for me? So yeah, of course, before when I detect such a thing, I have to report it to the examination board, which I do every year. I have to write a detailed report when I do that. So this is a very simple check, a couple of minutes. The report takes a lot more time, obviously. All right, so if I have collaborator access and I download the data and there are no duplicate IPs, then that's really the real raw data, right? No. Why not? Well, because the default settings in Qualtrics for data export do not do what they say they do. So download all the fields. Makes you feel like you really download all the fields. No, you don't. In fact, there are ways to fake data in Qualtrics itself, functionalities that are presented as good things to have that are actually really bad. So it's very easy to collect answers and then change their responses. And to detect that, you need to, again, ask to be added as a collaborator. So what are these functionalities that make it, that facilitate data fabrication and falsification? First, deleting responses. This is presented as, oh, you can easily remove specific participants. Wonderful. And as far as I know, there's no way of figuring out if those responses were actually removed. No way at all. But you can also edit responses manually in the browser. So perhaps you like to remove profanity, spelling errors, sensitive info, and so on. Do not do that in the browser. Just there's raw data and then there's processed data and what happens in between. And there's a tip that also tells you, oh, if you want to change too many answers, just use the retake link. So I tested this again this week because I tested it last year in August, and I was hoping that maybe in the meantime Qualtrics changed. No, it did not. So I set up a very simple questionnaire in Qualtrics, one question shown to everyone, and then I have a random assignment, group A or group B. And you can only answer the group-specific question for question 2. So very, very easy. I answer the questionnaire myself, like it's the early 2000s, and then I decide to make some edits. And you can see this. There's a review and publish button, and that is important because there is no way one can ever edit these things by accident. Even if you edit by accident, Qualtrics asks you to review and publish, and it clearly tells you there's an original and an edited. So really, no. And after that, Qualtrics adds this very non-visually salient gray triangle there to mark those observations. There's no way to see those things if you have multiple rows and columns. No way. And if you move your mouse over, you can see the timestamp of the change and who made the change. If you want to, yeah?
Is that downloaded into Excel or that disappears if you download it?
It does not download into Excel. So the proper way, the one that is more friendly in terms of visual search, is to download data. You need to download data twice, version 1 and version 2. The one difference between the two downloads is the following. You need to select exclude survey response edits, because by default, when you export data from Qualtrics, it exports the version that was edited, not the original version. So you have two data files, and then you can compare those two. And you see that the timestamps do not change. The IP address does not change. And I use different devices for this. You can see that if I exclude edits, I see the original thing. Also, in the browser, I could even answer questions that were not shown to the participant. Yay! But no, there's no information about who made the change, when. No, you need to use your mouse and really find that corner and click there. But there's more horror. So you can also use retake survey links. And this allows you or your respondent to go back into a survey response and edit it after it has been submitted. It's wonderful. And the only warning that you're given is that if you issue this retake link, it's going to count as a new survey towards your quota. So apparently that's the only problem that someone can foresee with doing this. So there are two types. You can retake the response and really fully replace the original response. The original response is gone forever. Or you could retake as a new response, and then this additional one is saved, but also the original one is kept. But in both cases, the survey will start from the beginning, will show the answers that the previous participant offered, and you're free to change anything you want. And this is presented as a nice functionality to have. So yes, with an exclamation mark, it's like, yay! How can you detect that? Well, to detect that, you need to add additional fields. So no, you do not download all the fields when you download the dataset from Qualtrics. You need to explicitly add these embedded fields. Those are the three embedded fields that you need to add. No, they are not the ones you would consider if you look at the list. There is one called original response ID. It does not return the original response ID. So you add those fields and then you export data again. And then you can see how things change. So the metadata, it's like timestamps, IP address, response time, that changes. So when I retake the answer, it has the information of the device that I used when I retook the answer. Interestingly, if I retake the answer for something that I previously edited, it starts from the original data, not from the edited data. But the even more frustrating part is that if you remember, I had this A/B random assignment. When you retake the survey, you are again randomly assigned to whichever group. You are not necessarily assigned to the group that you were in before. So now I was in group B and I could answer that question, but the variable that stores the condition is not updated. I thought that cannot be. So I had to test it again. Yeah, that's really the case. It does not get updated. Everything else gets updated except the one variable that stores which condition you were in. So in summary, these checks require collaborator access to the survey and also access to specific fields. And it also requires that the person who set up the survey did not choose to anonymize the answers. By the way, that does not anonymize anything. Just keep the IPs in there. So you need to put in quite some work to do the checks. The GitHub repo that I have there provides the same information in written form based on the checks that I've done in August, also with examples, CSV files that I've downloaded and so on. And second point, like even if you pass these tests, it really doesn't guarantee that it's real data. There are other ways to fake it besides those three. And yeah, that it is what it is. Checks for duplicate IPs are very fast to perform. Writing a report for an examination board or writing a report to contact a journal, that takes a lot more time. It takes me about 1 day because obviously like accusing a student that they committed fraud in their thesis is a very serious thing with serious consequences. So I'm not going to contact the examination board just because, I don't know, I looked at something for 5 minutes. So I need to properly document it, explain to the examination board what happened, and so on. So to recap, the problem with Qualtrics data is that we are required to trust more than we can ever verify. So having this specific problem in mind, the solution that I'm going to sort of suggest is not that. So we should definitely not rename the problem as the solution. We should actually try to find the solution. But if we continue to use Qualtrics-like platforms, because by all means, Qualtrics is not the only one that has these issues. It's just one example that I'm more familiar with. If we do continue to do this, then journals should verify data prior to publication. It should be ideally done by editors who are focused on research integrity and or reproducibility, computational reproducibility, that's what I mean. I really like the setup with the data editor team at the American Economics Association. They also have amazing resources on how to prepare reproducibility packages and the like. I would also recommend that you do not use the option to anonymize responses in Qualtrics. Anonymity is a very high standard to reach. It is a promise you make that you can't really keep. And it doesn't have to do only with IP addresses. You can identify someone also based on their other responses. So just because you don't have IP addresses doesn't mean that your data is anonymous. It's at most pseudonymized, or you tried to take some steps, but you can't really guarantee anonymity. If you're working with other people, ask your collaborators to add you to the survey, especially if you work with RAs. I don't know how people sleep at night when RAs do all the work. And we should also just accept that as much as we might check, there will be a certain percentage of data sets that are fabricated and we cannot detect. We just need to have a conversation of how high do we think that percentage is and how do we trade that off against the costs of detection. And as a final point, I think that describing data sets as author provided is a better descriptor than raw data, because we can't really verify it's raw data, but we can verify that it's been provided by the author. That's a perfect, accurate statement. Can we use something else? I wish. The only option that I found that sort of meets some of my desires is the following. It's called Open Lab. It's a web application for running and sharing online experiments. And the cool thing about it is that you can have an Open Lab study, link it to an OSF project. And then whenever a participant finishes their response, the data is automatically sent to OSF, meaning that in an OSF project, which is on servers that I cannot directly control, we have timestamps on when that data was recorded. And if I edit it, that will also be recorded. So it keeps track of things. The ideal data collection, though, data collection and storage setup for me, would have a mix of these attributes. It would be user-friendly. I want people to be able to use it without going through a PhD for it. It would have proper version control. It would also allow restricted access rights to balance data protection and transparency. And it would also allow for a wide range of methods. I talked about online surveys, but I'm using eye tracking data. Open Lab was not sending the eye tracking data to OSF, only answers to the survey. And I'm going to end here, 23 minutes, and open up for questions. Well, the point is that similar to measurement, we can only detect the fraud that we are able to detect. So depending on what net we have, that impacts what kind of fish we get. Thank you.